Usually when we talk about playing a sport, the objective is, well, it's right in front of you. And the environment is totally fixed.
Right. I mean, a basketball hoop is exactly 10 feet off the hardwood every single time.
Exactly. And the tennis net is always 3 feet high in the center. But then you step onto a golf course, and that whole static world just completely vanishes.
It really does. It's totally unpredictable.
Yeah. And I want you to picture a universal frustration that you've probably experienced if you've ever played. You're, standing in the fairway, you take out your rangefinder, and you laser the pin.
And it says exactly 150 yards.
Right. It says 150. So you pull the 7-iron, which is the club in your bones, goes exactly 150 yards. You make this beautiful, clean swing. It feels great.
But then you watch it fall out of the sky.
Yes. It lands like 15 yards short, buried in the face of a bunker. And you just stand there thinking, why? I mean, how is that even physically possible?
It feels like a total betrayal of the numbers, right? You did the math, you executed the physical motion, so the outcome should obviously match the input.
A betrayal of the numbers, that is the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
You did the math, but the golf course simply didn't care. And that is exactly what we are decoding today in this deep dive.
And we have some incredible sources for this.
We really do. We've got a fantastic stack of sources, including these deep analytical pieces from 2 top golf journalists and a really revealing breakdown from a touring golf professional.
Yeah, they completely expose the massive gap between how amateurs and, elite professional golfers calculate distance.
Because while amateurs think of distance as this fixed number printed on the bottom of a club, elite professionals realize they aren't playing a yardage at all.
No, they're playing a living, breathing environment.
Exactly. It really is a complete paradigm shift. The core thesis across all these sources is that the amateur believes a 7-iron equals 150 yards. But the professional, they believe a 7-iron is just a tool.
Right, a tool that produces a specific launch condition, which is then just violently manipulated by the atmosphere and the earth before it actually stops moving.
Violently manipulated. I love that.
It's true. Before they even take the club back, the best players in the world are, they're building this highly complex predictive ball flight model right in their heads, from the setup to the final rollout.
So if elite players aren't just memorizing total yardages, how do they even begin to build that mental model? Like if they aren't saying, I'm a 150 out, give me the 150 club, what is their baseline?
The absolute foundation of professional decision-making is carry distance. That is their true reference point.
Carry distance, meaning just how far the ball travels in the air.
Exactly. It's how far it flies before it makes its very first contact with the ground.
So not where it ends up by the hole, but specifically where it first hits the turf.
Yes. And the reason they obsess over that specific number is because the golf ball spends most of its controllable life in the air.
Because once it hits the ground, all bets are off.
Pretty much. Once that ball hits the turf, the variables just explode exponentially. Rollout is incredibly unpredictable.
Right.
I mean, it depends on the firmness of the ground, the slope it lands on, the landing angle, the grain of the grass, the moisture. You simply cannot perfectly control a bounce.
It's like carry's like throwing a dart at a dartboard. It hits and it sticks, so you know exactly where it landed based on your throw.
That's a great way to look at it.
But rollout is, it's like taking a bouncy ball and hurling it onto a gravel driveway.
Yeah.
Good luck guessing where that's going to end up.
That bouncy ball on gravel analogy captures the chaos perfectly. You cannot base a reliable millions of dollars mathematical model on a bouncy ball on gravel.
No, you definitely can't.
You have to base it on the dart. And this raises an important point about how they know exactly how far the dart is going to fly. Human perception is, frankly, remarkably flawed.
Right. We might feel like we hit it 150 yards in the air, but maybe it was actually 142, and the ground just did the rest of the work.
Exactly. And that completely explains something I've noticed a lot recently. If you go to a professional tournament, everyone is completely obsessed with launch monitors.
Oh, right. Those little radar boxes sitting right behind the players on the driving range.
Yes. They aren't just out there guessing or relying on their eyes anymore. They are actively calibrating against reality.
Because they can't trust their own eyes.
The touring professional in our sources explicitly mention this. They do not trust their own eyes because optical illusions on a golf course are just rampant.
Wow. So modern player development increasingly relies on that measurable data.
Yeah, because the ball spends its most controllable phase in the air. Understanding exactly how the environment alters that airtime is the total foundation of high-level golf.
Okay, so if the air is where the magic happens and where the disaster happens, I want to dig into how the air itself actually fights the golf ball.
Yeah, this is where the physics gets really fun.
It really does. The journalists in our sources dive deep into temperature, and this kind of blew my mind. I think most people assume that if you play in November, you hit it shorter just because you're wearing a sweater.
Right, or because your back is stiff from the cold.
Exactly. But there is actual intense physics at play here.
It is pure thermodynamics and material science. When you play in cold weather, two distinct physical changes happen. First, let's look at the air itself.
Okay.
Cold air is physically denser than warm air. The air molecules are literally packed closer together. So when the golf ball is flying through cold air, it experiences significantly more aerodynamic drag.
So it's kind of like trying to run through waist-deep water instead of running on the beach.
Exactly the same principle. That thicker fluid medium slows the object down much faster. But then there's the second factor, which people rarely consider, and that's the ball itself.
Right. The ball isn't just a piece of rock.
No, a modern golf ball has a core made of highly engineered synthetic rubber polymers. In warm conditions, those polymer chains are agitated and flexible. They act like a tightly coiled spring.
But in the cold,
In cold conditions, those polymers freeze up. They become rigid and lose their elasticity.
wait, why does the elasticity of the golf ball matter so much for distance?
Because a golf swing is fundamentally an energy transfer. When the club face hits the ball at 100 miles an hour, the ball actually compresses.
Like it flattens out.
Yeah, it visibly flattens out against the metal face for a fraction of a millisecond. If the ball is warm and elastic, it absorbs that energy and aggressively rebounds, creating massive ball speed.
Oh, I see.
But if the ball is cold and rigid, that compression efficiency just drops. The energy of the club essentially shatters against a hard surface rather than rebounding off a spring.
The energy just dies at impact.
It does. Lower compression means lower energy transfer, and lower energy transfer means lower ball speed off the face.
And when you combine a slower ball with that thicker, denser cold air we talked about, you get a drastically decreased carry distance.
Right. Now, if we look at warm conditions, it's the exact inverse. Warm air is less dense, so aerodynamic drag decreases. The ball becomes more elastic, allowing for greater compression.
Higher ball speeds, longer carry distances.
Exactly.
The implications of this for a player during an actual round are staggering. The sources point out that these conditions aren't just a day-by-day thing. They change during a single round of golf.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you have a 7-mister AM tee time, it might be 45 degrees. By the time you reach the 14th hole at 11:30 a.m., it could be 75 degrees. Your 7-iron is physically transforming its capabilities every single hour.
The mental math from hole 1 to hole 18 has to constantly evolve. The carry distance in the morning is a completely different baseline from the afternoon.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And we can't ignore the human element you hinted at earlier either. In that cold morning air, you are probably wearing a base layer, a polo, a sweater, and maybe a vest.
The classic autumn golf wardrobe.
Right. All those layers restrict your biomechanics. They reduce movement efficiency and limit your thoracic rotation.
Meaning you can't turn your shoulders as well.
Exactly. A restricted shoulder turn means a slight reduction in swing speed, which changes your timing patterns and how you deliver the club.
So consider the compound effect here. The ball is slower off the face, the air is thicker, and your physical engine is producing less power because you're wrapped in wool.
And elite players are calculating this compound effect before every single shot.
That is wild.
Yeah.
But temperature is just one invisible force. Let's talk about altitude. I know when people go play in Denver or somewhere in the mountains, they suddenly feel like superheroes.
Hitting the ball 20 yards further.
Exactly.
Well, that superhero feeling comes from a severe lack of aerodynamic drag. At higher elevations, the air pressure drops, meaning the air becomes significantly thinner.
So there's less physical resistance acting against the golf ball in flight.
Right, so it flies flatter, it flies longer, and interestingly, it flies with less side-to-side curvature.
Now, hold on. That doesn't totally track for me. I want to challenge that based on something the journalists wrote. They mentioned that faster swingers, the guys swinging 120 miles an hour, actually benefit more from this reduced resistance.
They do.
But if the air is thin in Denver, it's thin for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Why would a fast swinger get a disproportionate distance bonus compared to an amateur swinging 85 miles an hour?
It seems totally counterintuitive until you look at the formula for aerodynamic drag. Drag doesn't increase on a linear scale, it squares with velocity.
Oh, wow. So the faster it goes, the much harder the air pushes back.
Exactly. The penalty multiplies exponentially. At sea level, a player swinging at 120 miles an hour is fighting a massive wall of drag compared to a slower swinger.
So they're being penalized way more by thick air.
Precisely. So when you suddenly remove that air resistance by going up to altitude, the player generating the most ball speed experiences a much larger release of that penalty.
It's like taking off a heavier weighted vest.
That's a perfect analogy. They gain a disproportionate amount of yardage, especially with the longer clubs like the driver, because that's where the velocity is highest.
While shorter clubs are affected less because the overall speed is lower to begin with.
Right.
It's wild to think that a slight environmental change like altitude disproportionately rewards a specific style of play. You aren't just playing the course architecture, you're playing the physics of the local atmosphere.
And this is exactly why you see touring professionals actively adjusting their equipment. They'll change the weighting of their driver heads or switch to different golf balls just to adapt to the atmospheric pressure of the city they're in.
Incredible. Okay, so we've covered the invisible air. Now let's transition from the sky back down to the dirt, because the ball eventually has to sit on the ground and a steel club has to hit it.
Right, the moment of truth.
And right at the moment of impact, there is this ultimate control mechanism that dictates everything we've talked about, and that's spin.
Spin is everything. It's the steering wheel and the brakes. It influences the stability of the flight, the peak height, the descent angle, the curvature, and crucially, the stopping power when it finally lands.
But to generate consistent spin, you need a perfectly clean interaction between the metal grooves of the club face and the polymer cover of the golf ball, right?
You do. And the ground is constantly trying to sabotage that clean interaction.
Constantly. The specific lie conditions basically dictate your access to spin. The sources bring up this concept of a flyer lie, which is a fantastic term. What exactly is the mechanism of a flyer lie?
So a flyer lie typically occurs when the ball is sitting up slightly in thick rough. When the player swings down, blades of grass get trapped between the grooves of the club face and the golf ball at the exact millisecond of impact.
So the club isn't actually touching the ball cleanly. There's a layer of salad squished in between them.
A layer of salad that completely eliminates friction. And friction is the only thing that creates backspin. The club face slides against the ball, grips it, and gets it spinning.
But when you introduce grass,
You drastically reduce that friction, and the spin rate just drops off a cliff.
I was trying to visualize this when reading the sources, and the only analogy my brain could come up with is a car hydroplaning.
Oh, that's good.
You know, you're driving on the highway, you hit a puddle, water gets between your rubber tires and the asphalt, and suddenly you have zero traction.
Yeah.
The brakes don't work, the steering goes dead, and the car just unpredictably rockets forward.
I love that analogy because it is literally what is happening to the golf ball. The spin acts as the brakes. Without friction, you have no brakes.
The ball just takes off.
It launches with dramatically reduced spin, which means less drag holding it back, and it unexpectedly travels way beyond your intended target. It flies over the green, hence flyer lie.
Makes total sense.
And your hydroplaning analogy is literal in another sense, too, because moisture actual water does the exact same thing as grass.
Wait, really? Like just morning dew on the fairway?
Morning dew, a light drizzle, or even just a recently watered fairway. Water trapped between the club face and the ball reduces friction and totally kills spin consistency.
Wow.
A player might hit a perfect shot from the middle of the fairway, but if the grass was slightly wet, the ball might launch with lower spin and totally unpredictable flight characteristics.
So let's say the sun is out, the grass is dry, and you have a perfect lie in the middle of the fairway. No grass trapped, no water. You're completely safe from chaos, right?
Not quite. Even on a perfect dry lie, you still have microscopic impact geometry to worry about.
Microscopic.
Yeah, we're talking about changes of a fraction of an inch in where the ball strikes the club face.
Yeah.
A strike slightly toward the heel or the toe completely alters the launch angle and introduces something called the gear effect.
Wait, gear effect?
Yeah.
Like gears in a clock. How does hitting a golf ball slightly off-center turn it into a gear?
Think of the club head and the golf ball as two interlocking gears. When you hit the ball perfectly in the center of the club face, the energy transfers cleanly. But if you hit the ball out toward the toe of the club, the force of the impact causes the club head to twist open slightly.
Okay, so the club head twists to the right.
Exactly. As it twists to the right, it drags across the ball, imparting opposite spin hook spin to the left. The twisting club head acts as one gear, forcing the ball to rotate the opposite way, like the second gear.
So even if your swing path is perfectly straight, Just missing the center of the club by a quarter of an inch creates a mechanical twisting that curves the ball totally off target.
Yes, and that slight mishit also changes the spin loft, which is the dynamic angle between how the club face is pointing and the direction the club head is moving.
And I'm guessing small changes there are a big deal.
Huge. Small changes in spin loft create major differences in carry distance. Add in the grain direction of the grass and the firmness of the turf beneath the ball, and you realize how incredibly fragile a perfect golf shot really is.
It's honestly a miracle anyone ever hits a green. So if a flyer lies strips the ball of its spin, it's essentially flying blind.
Hmm.
And I imagine that lack of stability makes it completely vulnerable to the next environmental layer, the wind.
Oh, absolutely. The wind will tear a low spin shot apart.
We're transitioning to the forces dictating the final descent here. The wind is the most obvious variable, right? Because you can literally feel it on your face. But there is a counterintuitive fact from the journalists in our sources that totally reversed my understanding of headwinds versus tailwinds.
Most golfers assume that a 10-mile-per-hour headwind hurts your distance exactly as much as a 10-mile-per-hour tailwind helps it.
Right. It's a one-to-one trade in their minds, which makes logical sense. Plus 10, minus 10. It should cancel out perfectly.
But aerodynamic physics just doesn't work like basic arithmetic. Headwinds increase aerodynamic drag dramatically, acting like a brick wall and reducing carry distance much more than most people realize.
But a tailwind doesn't give you that equal boost back.
No, it doesn't.
Why wouldn't it? Shouldn't the wind just carry the ball forward on its back?
Think of a golf ball like an airplane wing. An airplane needs air rushing over its wings to generate lift and stay in the sky.
Okay.
A golf ball relies on its backspin to generate that exact same aerodynamic lift. When you have a headwind, there is more air rushing over the ball, which actually generates more lift, pushing the ball higher before the drag finally knocks it down.
Right, balloons up.
But when the wind is moving in the same direction as the tailwind, it disrupts that relative airflow.
So the ball loses its airspeed, just like a plane.
Exactly. It loses its aerodynamic lift. The ball tends to fall out of the sky much faster because it just can't climb. It alters the descent characteristics in a way that just doesn't cleanly offset the penalty of a headwind's drag.
Wow. So a headwind is a brick wall,
Yeah.
but a tailwind isn't a free ride.
Yeah.
A tailwind sweeps your legs out from under you.
That's a really great way to visualize it. And then, then you have crosswinds, which do much more than just push the ball sideways.
They do.
Yeah, they actively multiply curvature based on your side spin. If you naturally hit a fade, which curves left to right, and the wind is blowing left to right, that crosswind doesn't just add to the fade.
It makes it worse.
It aggressively exaggerates that curvature. It compounds the aerodynamic forces.
Man. Okay, so we've navigated the wind and the ball is finally coming down. Now we have to deal with the actual terrain of the golf course, elevation and landing angles.
Because hitting to an elevated green is completely different than hitting downhill.
Right. Hitting to a green that is uphill plays shorter, since the ground basically comes up to meet the ball early, and hitting downhill plays longer, because the ground drops away and the ball stays in the air.
That affects the raw carry distance, yes. But remember our dart versus bouncy ball analogy from the beginning.
Oh, right. The unpredictable rollout.
This is where the unpredictability of rollout comes back to haunt you. Hitting downhill doesn't just keep the ball in the air longer, it severely changes the landing angle. The ball hits the ground at a much shallower angle relative to the slope.
Oh, I see. Because it's skimming the surface rather than plunging down into it.
Precisely. A shallow landing angle aggressively increases forward release. The ball hits and just keeps skipping and rolling.
Like skipping a stone on a pond.
Yeah. Whereas a steeper landing angle, like hitting into an uphill slope, acts like throwing a dart. It kills the forward momentum and drastically reduces rollout.
And all of that rollout behavior is further influenced by the ground firmness, the slope, the grain direction, and the moisture we talked about earlier.
Every single one of those factors matters.
When you stack all of this up, the cold air density freezing the polymers in the ball, the morning dew creating hydroplaning flyer lies, the gear effect from a millimeter mishit, the crosswind curvature, the shallow downhill landing angles, it feels completely overwhelming.
It's a lot of math.
How does anyone ever hit a golf ball close to the hole?
Well, if we connect all these individual mechanisms to the bigger picture, the profound realization here is that elite golf is not simply about swing mechanics in a vacuum.
Right.
A player can have the most mechanically beautiful swing in the world, but it doesn't guarantee a perfect result if it's deployed without context. Golf is an exercise in pure environmental adaptation.
They aren't just hitting a ball.
No, the best players in the world aren't just athletes swinging a stick. They are real-time supercomputers. They are constantly combining biomechanics, material science, kinematics, and fluid dynamics. They process all these signals simultaneously into one predictive model before they ever pull the club back.
So to bring this all together for you listening, the next time you're out there on the course and your laser rangefinder says 150 yards, realize that 150 is just a suggestion.
A very loose suggestion.
Exactly. The golf course is not a static playing field with fixed dimensions. It's a living, breathing environment, and it is constantly communicating with you via the wind, the temperature, the moisture, and the firmness of the turf beneath your feet.
And the players who learn to recognize and interpret those invisible signals, they become intelligent, adaptable, and remarkably consistent.
And the ones who just blindly memorize a yardage on a piece of paper, they're the ones who stay frustrated, staring at a ball buried in a bunker, wondering what went wrong with their perfect swing.
Which leaves us with something really fascinating to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive.
What's that?
Well, next time you watch a professional tournament on television and you see a player agonizing over a single approach shot, maybe they're stepping around the grass, feeling the firmness, tossing a few blades into the air to gauge the wind shear, staring up at the clouds, debating with their caddy for 3 full minutes.
Yeah, we've all seen that.
Consider the sheer volume of real-time physics and environmental modeling their brain is processing right in that moment. And if humans have the capacity to instinctively calculate aerodynamics, friction coefficients, and thermodynamics in mere seconds, just to hit a small polymer ball with a steel stick,
Right.
what other everyday environments are we walking through completely missing the hidden variables that are quietly shaping our actions?